Well, for more, we can cross to our EU correspondent, Dave Keating, who's following that summit for us in Prague. Dave, tell us, what have the leaders been discussing so far today?
Well, so far it's not been anything too divisive. We had the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, give a brief about that Nord Stream sabotage, those explosions that took place in the Nord Stream pipelines under the Baltic Sea. We still don't know the details about that or who's behind that, although, of course, Russia is strongly suspected. They moved on to talking about the war in Ukraine and efforts to fight Russian propaganda, efforts to counter Russian aggression. Everyone's pretty much on the same page on that. However, they've just moved into the much more contentious discussions, which is over energy, which is, of course, related to the Ukraine war, because we know that Vladimir Putin is using energy as a weapon against the EU, kind of as blackmail, and there's real concern about what's coming up this winter.
Yeah, Dave, those gas price caps, as you mentioned, on the agenda this afternoon, they are contentious. Explain to us why that is.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ideas about what can be done to protect people this winter from these spiraling energy costs. And one of those ideas is to cap the price of gas. So that would be setting a certain level that companies and traders cannot pay more for on the international markets when they buy gas for import into the EU. Now, there's 15 EU countries who want this to happen. However, there's concern that if you set that price cap, it's a global market, it's a private market. And so who's going to get the gas? The countries that are willing to pay more. So let's say Japan, China, Brazil, India, they'll be able to pay more than the EU's cap, and then the EU will just make the situation worse by having this cap, because then they'll make the energy shortage worse. One idea on the table today is to have a dynamic price cap that would always be just above what, say, Japan is paying. But experts I've talked to are skeptical about whether that works, because it can't necessarily respond quick enough to another country raising their cap. The countries that are really opposed to this are Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark. The Commission, for its part, they want a cap just on Russian gas imports. The problem with that is the Council's legal services have said that would be a sanction against Russia. That needs unanimous approval of all 27 leaders, and Viktor Orban would probably veto it. These other measures would be economic measures. They only need a majority vote. So it's going to get contentious in there this afternoon, particularly because a lot of EU leaders are very angry at German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for unleashing a 200 billion euro self-bailout on energy earlier this week. They say this wasn't coordinated at EU level. It's such a massive amount of money that it could have destabilizing effects on the EU market. And so in turn, they're going to say, if you've done this for yourself, Germany, at least don't stand in the way of our efforts to either have a cap on the price of gas, or even more controversially, maybe have an EU fund, take out more common debt in order to have a similar fund that Germany just did for itself, but for everyone at EU level. There's lots of ideas on the table in there, and this is a very contentious subject. At most, what we'll get today is an agreement on what to ask the Commission to propose over the next week, and then the EU leaders could approve that in 2 weeks' time when there's the next European Council summit in Brussels. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody's saying when they come out of this, because I have a feeling things are getting quite heated behind me here at Prague Castle.
It certainly will be interesting. And Dave, you will be there to bring us the latest later on today. Dave Keating, thank you very much for that update reporting from the EU Leaders Summit in Prague.